our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. So you are here, you're touching every heart. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, we believe you are. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yes, you are God. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that's just who you are. That is who you are. That's who you are. That is who you are. Oh, it's who you are. You make a way. You make a way when there seems to be no way. You work miracles. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Come on, let's sing this truth out. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Oh, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Oh, 'cause you are. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
That is who you are. It's who you
We
always
know
be.
that is who you are.
Always be.
Make a way right now, God. Won't you make a way? Before I spoke a word, you singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. 'Cause you've been so, so kind. Deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelmed, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. Overwhelm us with your love, God. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. Thank you, Lord. Been so, so good to me. Thank you, Jesus. I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. 'Cause you've been so, so kind. Love of God, oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelmed, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Did you know that? There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Oh, we're thankful. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down. Come on, let's declare this together. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow, there's no shadow you won't light up. We serve a big God, don't we? Because you know that God is bigger than our doubts, bigger than our fears, bigger than anything that we come up against. This next song might be new to some of you, but it just declares the bigness of God, the goodness of God. So I'd encourage you as you catch on, it's an easy melody, that you would sing this just as a declaration to God that He's bigger than anything we face. Speak to me when the silence steals my voice. You understand me. You understand me. So come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. You understand me. So I throw all the cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you, 'cause you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiation with the God of all creation, 'cause you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. Hey. So much bigger, God. I believe, but help my unbelief. You understand me. You understand me. Help me reach the faith that's underneath. You understand me. You understand me. Yes, you understand me, God. You understand me. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you, 'cause you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiation with the God of all creation, 'cause you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. Oh, it's so much bigger than I thought. Bigger than all my fears, oh God.
Will rest in the Father's hands.
Leave it all.
Leave the rest in the Father's
Anyone need to rest
hands.
this morning?
I will rest in the Father's hands.
Leave it all.
Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest, and I will rest in the Father's hands. I leave the rest in the Father's hands, and I will rest in my Father's hands.
Leave it
I
all.
leave the rest Father says, I rest in you, even when my eyes can't see. I will rest in you, Jesus. Jesus, I thank you for this moment where we can just rest in our Father's hands, where we can just lay everything at your feet and just be wrapped up in your arms, in your overwhelming, reckless love that is in constant pursuit of our hearts. God, and as we were singing that song, I just kept thinking of the verse that our God is able to accomplish infinitely, abundantly more than we could ever ask or imagine. So God, we just make that our prayer and our declaration today, God, that you are able, even when we can't see, even when we can't feel it. God, we know that your word is true and you are who you say you are. So you are able. So God, even in our doubt, even in our wondering, we just choose to declare that today, that you are able. God, thank you for your spirit that is with us, helping us overcome areas of unbelief, meeting us in our doubt. God, but thank you for this moment where we can be, that we can just find refreshing in the freedom of just knowing how small we are and how great you are and how even greater your love is for us. That your love is infinitely more than we could ever ask for or imagine. God, so thank you for this time with you where we can just get a glimpse of just your amazing, unending, reckless love. And we just ask for more. We want more glimpses. We want to know your heart more. God, thank you for the way that you sustain us and that you satisfy us and that you meet us. God, you are so good. You are so faithful. And we choose to rest in you. Because there's no other place where we can get true, peaceful, satisfying rest. It's in your arms. It's with you. It's in your presence. We thank you. We praise you, Jesus. We love you. It's in your mighty name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. You can have a seat, Heartland. Hey, well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing here in the room? Good, yeah? And all of you who are watching online, maybe you're, preparing the charcuterie or putting the wings in the oven or whatever it may be for something happening later today. We're glad that you are with us, too. I love that song because it reminds us that the most important thing about every single one of us, every single one of you and you watching online, isn't what happened this week, isn't what you did or didn't do. It's the love, the great big love that God has for you. And if you experience anything today, if you never come back to Heartland again, what we hope you leave here with is the awareness of how loved you are by the God who made you and loves you and is walking with you in your life. That's our hope. That's our desire. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Brad, and I get to serve as one of the pastors around here at Heartland, just walking with many of you in that love of God as we set our eyes on Jesus and try to make him first in our lives. We have this conviction, this belief around here that we get to experience God's love most when we experience it in relationships with other people, in connections and friendships and communities. And so that's why earlier today in between services, many of you fellas were over there in the atrium as part of our men's meetup. Meetups are things we do from time to time just to help our big church feel small by helping you connect with someone else that you have something in common with. And so many of you fellas took advantage of doing that today. Some of you ladies did that earlier in this month. We'll have more meetups coming up in the future. I encourage you, take advantage of those. If you were a guy who who didn't get to stop over there, make sure you do so over in the atrium here on campus to find out some of the men's events and groups and things that are happening here in 2022 that you might want to know about to put some other guys around you as you walk through life, because it's something that we all need. But because we believe in this idea of community and relationships, that's why I'm so excited that in a couple Wednesday nights we're starting up a new season of something we call Midweek. And Midweek is a thing that happens here on campus as well as online at the same time, where we get to kind of sit in circles with one another and hear additional thoughts from our pastors and leaders from that week's sermon, as well as just some discussions with one another about how can we live this out? What do we do with this? And how does this begin to make a difference in our lives? And I tell you that so that you can begin planning to jump in with us on Wednesday nights. I'm there, Dan, Craig, all of our pastors, many of our pastors are there as part of this. Encourage you to take advantage of that. It's a way that you can make space in your week on Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, where you can make space for some intentional kind of conversations and connections going deeper with God and with one another. You can find out all the details online, on our website, on the app. Sign up, bring a friend with you, and let's come have a great time together. Last Sunday, I had a chance just to do some things I don't usually get to do. I got to sit in the kids' rooms, sit in some of the small chairs, get to hear the stories, go over to the middle school ministry meeting over in the dock and have some fun with them, watch their amazing teaching and fun that they were having. And I got to have a conversation as I was walking back to our auditorium here with someone who said, I just have to tell you what God's doing in my life. I love that statement. She said, I went through a season that was harder than I could have ever imagined. And I was convinced that God had used up every single one of his blessings and mercies and grace on me through that season just to get me to the finish line of that. And I said, God, if you never do anything else in my life again, I will still love you because of all that you've given me in this season. And she's like, what God has shown me is that he is still working. He is still giving me his grace. He is still giving me his blessings. And I want more people to know that his mercies are new every morning like I've experienced them to be in my life. And as I was having this conversation, I was just thankful, thinking of that's what we hope people experience at Heartland. That's what we hope our kids experience, our students, our adults in our communities as we serve this community, that we get to live and lean deeper into the love of God. And all of this happens because of those of you who serve and give so generously here at Heartland. And so thank you, because your generosity is making a difference in the lives of real people here at Heartland and out in our community. So thank you for those of you who serve. For those of you who give. If you want to give, if you love the mission of this church and this community, I encourage you to give financially online or on the app or on the website. If this is your first time around Heartland or at church, by no means, this is for those people who love Jesus and love the home that we have here at Heartland and what God's doing. So today we get to finish out a series that we've been in this month, and I'm excited. Please give a big old welcome for Dan Jacobsen.
Well, hey, how we doing, everybody? You guys watching online, great to see you too. Hey, I want to start a time together today with someone who jumped in the chat last Sunday. We were talking about how the safest place in the world for us to doubt really shouldn't be Google. It should be the church. That paradoxically, if you've got doubts about God, the safest place that you should bring them is to this place where other people have experienced God and maybe had different experiences than you, and it could be a safe place for you to kind of navigate the doubts that you experience. One woman took a risk last week and just shared with us, we were talking about how we want to be a safe place for people who maybe don't feel like they believe fully, but they want to explore Jesus. And here's what she said. It was so beautiful. I love this. She said, it's been many years since I felt the Lord, but I came back to Heartland last year. And he stunned me how he came back into my life. She wanted to say how Heartland's making space for her to doubt was the thing that God used. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I just love the fact, I think that's amazing. I feel like all of you in the room could applaud at that. I know online, we're grateful for the chat. Thanks for engaging with us, and you know who you are. We're just glad that God's moving in your life in that specific type of way. I love the word that she used. She used the word stunned. Stunned. Have you ever been stunned? Lots of things in our lives can stun us, but this word that she used, stunned, is really, I think, a great descriptor for the persons who we're going to look at their life today. The biggest doubter that ever lived was stunned by Jesus. Now, last week we talked about Thomas. Thomas is probably the most famous doubter that ever lived, but he's not the biggest doubter who ever lived. No, that distinction belongs to this guy named Saul. Saul, if you don't know Saul, we're going to learn about him today in Acts chapter 9. If you got a phone or a Bible or whatever, just find your way to Acts chapter 9. We'll kind of walk through that together. But Saul, let me just give you a background on him. Saul was a big doubter. He doubted that Jesus actually rose from the dead. And for Saul, the reason that he doubted that Jesus actually rose from the dead, the reason that he doubted that Jesus was God, it all came down to the way that Saul was raised. Isn't that kind of how a lot of things in life go for us? How we were raised kind of gives us a worldview. And here's what I mean. Saul was raised as a Jewish person who believed in God and was really, really careful about the things of God. He was a part of this group called the Pharisees. The Pharisees were this group of people who they really thought that God wanted them to become a moral nation that could experience his covenant blessings based upon how good they were and how well they kept the law. Okay, I just probably turned into like Woodstock and Snoopy, and you're like, blah, 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 right? So Saul was an extremist. He thought that the way for his people to experience God was through good, moral living. And so a lot of times the Pharisees became like the moral police of their day, always going around telling people what to do, what not to do, creating all these laws, creating all these systems. And the reason that Saul didn't, trust that Jesus was raised from the dead, it really was because he took the Bible seriously. It wasn't because he didn't believe in God. Actually, he believed in God a lot. He took the Bible seriously, particularly the part of the Bible that he read, which was in Deuteronomy. He remembered that one part of Deuteronomy that said, "Cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree." And so Saul had heard of this person, Jesus, who was crucified. All the people were saying that he had risen from the dead, but in his mind, it didn't jive with his worldview. He couldn't actually come to terms with this idea that someone who had been crucified, who hung on a tree, could actually be God himself, or let alone blessed by God to be raised from the dead. It didn't make sense. These people were crazy. In Saul's mind, this was ludicrous. And so Saul took it upon himself. He went, I'm not making this up, he went to the chief priests, because even some of God's priests are chiefs. He went to the chief priests and he said to them, all these people making all this fuss about this guy Jesus, this is not right. This is not helping us become the moral country that we should be. Why don't you let me do something about this? And they gave him authority to go arrest people. And so Saul would actually go all around the region and he would go arrest people who believed in what they called the way of Jesus. And he would put them in jail because they were causing problems for Israel. Now, here's where we pick up Saul's story right here in Acts chapter 9. Here's what it says. I love this story. Oh my goodness. All right. Saul neared Damascus on his journey when suddenly a light from heaven flashed all around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. And notice this. "I'm Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless, of course. They heard the sound, but they didn't see anyone. So Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. And there he stayed for 3 days. He was blind, and he did not eat nor drink anything. Saul's life is a life, this story is a story of moving from doubt to faith. I think there's 4 steps along this journey that Saul shows us about his life, about how Jesus stunned him, and what happens when we have an experience with God that changes our life forever. Now, I want to be clear, this is a remarkable story. Does anybody find this story hard to believe? I mean, it's okay to be honest, right? I find this a little hard to believe, and here's the reason that I find this hard to believe, is because I've never had a bright light shine down upon me and heard the audible voice of God. Now, only like 2 people in the room raised their hand and said this was hard to believe. So I take it that the other, 99% of the room has had this experience. Have you had that experience? Yeah, you have. You're like, no, those are truck lights is what those were. Terrible joke. So I've never had this experience. Never had this experience. I've never heard the audible voice of God, and to be certain, I've never been struck blind. And yet, what Saul does in this moment is to go persecute Jesus. And on the way, when Saul wasn't looking for Jesus, we see that Jesus was looking for Saul. Isn't that kind of the way, maybe you didn't have the blinding light experience, but isn't that maybe more true to the story of your life and your faith? Maybe you weren't looking for Jesus, but somewhere in your life, Jesus looked for you and he found you and he kind of got you and shook you up a little bit and said, hey, pay attention to me. Don't be pushing against me any longer. This is what Saul experienced. And I think the first step that he shows us along this journey from doubt to faith, the first step is really something that God does. He gives us an unexpected encounter. I think that doubt is countered by an encounter with Jesus. How do we move from doubt to faith? Well, we do that when we encounter the risen Jesus. I think this is so personal of Jesus. Isn't this so personal that this man who was saying that Jesus is not raised from the dead would appear to him? That he wouldn't take the testimony of other people to be valid, but he had to have his own encounter, his own experience with God. It's so much like Thomas. Thomas said the same exact thing. And here Jesus did. Last week he came into the room with Thomas and said, hey, check it out, man. I'm actually here. I'm not just raised in people's hearts. I'm physically raised from the dead. Touch my hands. Here's my side. You can believe. But interestingly for Saul, he doesn't get the whole touch my hand thing. He just gets blinding light and a voice from heaven. I think it's a little strange that Jesus handles Thomas and he handles Saul differently. But if we think about it, it shouldn't surprise us. Because we know this, God is he's the best father. If you're a parent in the room, I'm learning this lesson that sometimes as a parent, I can raise my voice at my kids and get two different reactions. One of my kids, I raised my voice to them and they melt. This happened literally yesterday. Same situation, raised my voice at one of my kids, kind of was shocked by one of their behaviors. It was a bad moment of parenting, but I was like, dude, what are you doing? And he just melted. And then I turned to the kid who instigated the whole thing, and I said, how could you? And he looked at me and he laughed. You've had this before? This is your kids too, it's not just me. Okay, good. All right, well, we're all kind of growing as parents together to become more, good parents are going to be consistent in their approach, or they're going to be consistent in their expectations, but they're going to change their approach to each kid. I just love watching Jesus give these unexpected encounters with people who doubted him. For Thomas, he knew the personal way he needed to come to him was physically to say, look, man, touch here. But for Saul, he had to come with military power. And so he blinds him. He incapacitates him. He speaks to him. And it's enough for Saul. Saul is led by the hand into the city. And I think that's an interesting thing for Saul to have experienced, because before this moment of encountering Jesus, he was a military commander who was on a mission, and all of a sudden he stopped in his tracks and he has to be humiliated enough to be led into the city by some of the people that he was on this mission with. All of them going towards Damascus, confused as to what just happened and doubting what just took place, but taking steps of faith. I think about this encounter that they had, this unexpected encounter with Jesus. It strikes me that Jesus encounters us in so many different ways, doesn't he? I was like 17 years old when I think I finally encountered Jesus in a real way in my life. I'm what you call a book nerd. You call them that, right? Yeah. And the way that I relate to God is mostly, not always, but mostly through my mind. Like I love just reading about God and studying about God. And it was actually in this moment where Jesus met me when I was doing some study and really digging in. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're like an intellectual or someone like that. And you just, Jesus has met you in reason. If that's you, you've got people in your world that are in good company. Guys like C.S. Lewis and others who have found reasons for God. But I know that not everybody's like that. And sometimes people encounter Jesus through restored relationships, through how they experience other people. I know one person who told me that they started to believe that Jesus was real because what they had done to someone was so egregious, but that person turned to them and forgave them and reconciled with them and gave them a fresh start. And they said it was just like what Jesus had done for them. This person said, well, I feel like I encountered Jesus through the actions of somebody else. And I know some other people who they could read the books and be like, yeah, whatever, and they could experience other people and they could be like, yeah, whatever. But you put them on the side of Yosemite, on the side of the Grand Canyon, on the edge of creation. Get me out over the water. Put me on a boat in the middle of an ocean. Let me feel how small I am. And we'll sing the opposite of that song. You're bigger than I thought. I'm smaller than I thought I was. And a lot of people experience God and they experience Jesus when you get outside of kind of the regular hustle and bustle of a city and you go out and you experience the creation that God is giving and you realize that you are just a creature in God's creation. And it causes you to encounter Jesus in a different way. Now, however it goes for you, Saul encountered Jesus on this road and it changed his life forever. And Jesus told him, after this unexpected encounter, to keep going to where he was going in the first place, towards Damascus. And so, I wonder if in his mind, in his blind eyes, Saul thought, well, I've got nowhere else to go, I might as well keep going. And so he, led by the hand, he does this next thing. It's the second part of the faith journey for Saul. He just simply takes a step. And I think when doubt stays put, when doubt says, man, this has all gone crazy, this can't possibly be true, when doubt speaks words of negative faith into our hearts, that it's too far gone, I think faith is what it is that pushes us to take a step. Here's how I think it looks for us all. If I were to chart this out for us, I just want to throw this chart up there. I think there's this unexpected encounter that happens. And then there's this next step that happens. It's kind of this moment where this arrow leads us to take a step of faith. And for all of us, we've experienced God in some way or another, but many of us get stuck right here in this arrow. This is an arrow, Heartland for a long time has had this phrase of like arrows out, and I just don't want to confuse you because right now in this diagram, the arrows represent doubt, all right? They're not arrows out, they're arrows that doubt. It's a really bad dad joke, which is the best type of dad joke. So so you have this encounter and then you take a step. Right here, there's this moment of doubt. This moment of questioning. Did that actually happen? Did I get that the right way? Am I hearing you right, God? And Saul takes the next step. He goes to the city. And Saul waits. He waits. And while Saul is waiting, his waiting isn't wasted. For 3 days, he's just standing there waiting for the next word to come to him. And waiting for the next thing to come to him. And by faith, Saul just stayed right there. I think about the story of Abraham. Abraham was told, leave your country and go to the place where I'll tell you. And Abraham goes, where am I going? And God says, take the first step and then I'll tell you. Ruth is the woman who loses everything in the Old Testament, and she decides to take a step of faith to go with her mother-in-law back to her mother-in-law's home country, and there she encounters Boaz. That's a story from the Bible, not from the Hallmark Channel, by the way. Faith often looks in the circumstances around us and sees that things are bleak, that we're blind, that we didn't expect it to go this way. And where doubt would say, just stay put, just stay there. Faith says, I don't know, but I'm going to take a step anyway. I mean, y'all, there was 13 seconds on that clock last week. Did you watch the same game I did? Any other one of us would have been like, not enough time. Not enough time. We would have doubted. We would have been like, what? But we got some faith-filled football players, don't we? Who looked around and said, there's still time on the clock. There's still hope. 13 seconds. I've never seen anything like it. Have you? Here's my question. Today, if there's 14 seconds on the clock, how are you feeling? You are not. Put that chart back up. Put that chart back up. You're right here. You're right here. Because last week something amazing happened, and right here you're like, I don't know. right? I mean, this is the predicament of life for us. I'm using football as like an insane analogy, but like something miraculous could happen, but then you get in this moment of being like, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's real. All right, I'm going to stop talking about the Chiefs. God help them. And I want to talk about you. Because in your life, I think God is always calling us to more. He's giving us these encounters and asking us to take a step of faith if only we would overcome the doubt that exists in us. Sometimes Jesus will allow us to go through moments of waiting. 3 days Saul was in Damascus before anything happened. Moments of waiting before he actually shows us and lifts the fog from our heart to see that he's actually working the whole time. You see, when Saul was waiting, Jesus was working. And here's how we know it. It's because there's a second character in the story. There's a guy named Ananias. And here's what is bizarre to me is that Ananias goes through the same cycle that Saul goes through. Look at this. It says in Damascus there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, Ananias. Like, hey Siri. Yes, Lord. I want Siri to say yes, Lord, back to me, but that's another thing. Yes, Lord. He answered. The Lord told him, watch this, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hand on him to restore his sight. Now, Ananias is a follower of Jesus. He's living in Damascus. If Saul's mission is successful, this is one of the people that Saul is going to lock up. And Ananias is visited by the Lord in a vision, the same way that Saul was visited by the Lord. And instead of kind of being blinded, he's given a mission. He said, go meet with Saul. And I love that in the moments of waiting in our life, God is often preparing a third party to come join us in the midst of our blindness, to come join us on our journey from doubt to faith. Ananias was someone uniquely called by Jesus to actually go into the hardest moment, to go put his hand on the arm of a sworn enemy and to give him back his sight. And listen, Ananias doesn't like this any more than you like this. He actually looks back at God and kind of with some audacity says, I've got some intel that might help you, Lord, with your assessment and your battle strategy. Could I just tell you what I know? And here's what he says. Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports, like there's a lot of us who know this thing, about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests, there they are, to arrest all who call on your name. Translation, God, this is a bad idea. Because if he's successful, he's going to lock me up, possibly kill me. Haven't you heard all the disaster? He's not one of us, God. Don't you have any other followers in Damascus named Ananias? Unexpected encounter led to a step of faith, which in the middle of was doubt. And look at what Jesus has to say to Ananias. He says, but the Lord said, go. This is the second time that Jesus had to say, go. You know, when I have to tell my kids twice, it's no good, right? He says, go. I think he might have said, go, right? This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. That's like everybody. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. One day we'll talk about all that. But here's what I want you to see. Then Ananias went to the house. He took a step of faith. I want to show it to you again because we're starting to see these patterns overlap about this doubt to faith experience. And so they have this unexpected encounter which leads to a moment of questioning, which leads to a step of faith. And here's what Ananias does. He decides to try it. He says, there's no arguing with you, God. The only way forward is the way forward. And here's where Ananias goes. He shows us that the third step of this journey from doubt to faith is simply follow through. Faith follows through. I don't know if you've ever swung a baseball bat or a golf club or shot a free throw and you tried not to follow through on your shot. You can make contact, but you probably won't hit it as far as you think you're going to. Right? If you're like Happy Gilmore, kind of like slapping at the ball like it's a hockey puck, it'll dribble down the fairway. You'll get some advance, but it won't go the way it's designed to. I think a lot of us in our doubts to faith experiences, we We know God is prompting us to do something. We know God is calling us to something greater. We know God's calling us to something more. But we just take that first step and we try and see, like, God, am I doing it right? And sometimes we bail before we follow through on the whole thing. The first step is a good step, but there's got to be a second and a third to go the whole way with what God said. I know this is a little abstract, so let me share this with what this experience looked like in my life. When I was 17, I thought that I had this deep impression. I didn't hear a voice, but I had this deep conviction that God wanted me to give up my dreams for making money and being a lawyer and being, successful that way. And he wanted me to spend my life learning the Bible and then making it plain for other people. I don't know how, as a 17-year-old, I knew that this was kind of like what I was supposed to do, but this is the thing that I thought I was supposed to do. This was like the unexpected encounter with God that really changed the trajectory of my life. But I wasn't sure. I had that arrow of doubt of like, Jesus, is that really what I'm supposed to do? So I remember one afternoon I got online and I got an application to a ministry school in Chicago. School that actually turns away more people than they accept. And a school that I didn't know if I belonged at. And so I filled out the application. I left all the good names off the application because I want to know, like, God, are you actually calling me to this? I didn't tell my family I was even applying. Later in life, my mom told me it was the dumbest thing I ever did was to apply to only this school. I've done a lot of dumb things. I didn't think this was the dumbest thing, but she told me that. She said that was really not smart. But I had to know. Like, God, are you calling me down this road? Because if you are, I'll keep walking it. But if you're not, I'd rather cut this off at the pass. Just let me know. I'll do whatever. I'll go, But if this is what you want from me, here's my step. And so I took a step. And it took 3 agonizing months for that acceptance letter to come back in the mail. 3 months in limbo of just like, God, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing for me. I don't know if it's what you're calling me to. God, I just really don't know. Will you please make it clear? And then I was accepted. And that unexpected encounter went to a step of faith, went to a follow-through. Well, I took course after course after course and met person after person after person. And that commitment that I made to God all those years ago has led me here today, not out of some like miracle. No, that's okay. But just here's how it's played out, right? That one moment, I can trace my entire life's trajectory based upon that one step of faith, that one risk that cost everything that I had so many doubts about. I didn't know where it would lead me. I didn't know how I could do it. I didn't know where it would lead me to. But here's what I've known is that as I've taken that step and as I followed through, there's been more doubts than I ever could have imagined. Because I moved to Kansas City 7 months ago. And I've learned to love y'all, but can we be real? I didn't know. Ryan, I didn't know you were a Packers fan. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I'd be such a huge KU fan. Sorry for their loss last night. I didn't know that we would connect in such a heart level. I didn't know. And I had a great environment, a great family back where we came from, but we felt so clearly God pushing us to take a step and to follow through. And all these moments, there'd be moments of doubt. And here's what I want to show you. That sometimes in life, you've got to just go the whole way. And this is what Ananias does. I want to bring him back to the story because this is where the two of them converge. Then Ananias went into the house and he entered it. Think about the courage this must have taken. He laid his hands on Saul. He said, "Brother Saul, the Lord, Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit." And then watch what happens. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. He got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. This whole unexpected encounter with Jesus, which led to him taking a step, which led to him following through, right? For Saul, he just had to stay in the house for 3 days. He just had to stay. That was his follow through. For Ananias, he just had to go. He just had to be obedient. He just had to bless Saul. And immediately, God gives Saul his sight back, but more than that, God gives Saul his soul back. And what this does for both of them, where both of their paths converge, I want to just throw this up there. Let's skip all the way to the end, guys. An unexpected encounter yields a step of faith, which goes to follow through, which led them to even more trust. When God works in your life, he doesn't just put you on autopilot. He doesn't just put you on an assembly line and say, here you go, from here on out, it's going to be, perfect until the end, and you'll never doubt whether you're on the right track or not. No, there's this unexpected encounter which leads to a doubt, which leads to a step of faith, which leads to a doubt, which leads to follow through, which for you and me, we live a lot of our time having done the thing we think God has asked us to do and not knowing if the payoff is going to be there. For Saul and for Ananias, the payoff was there instantaneously. Once they did this, they got more of this. And they did this with more of this. They had more trust, more faith. This is faith, full circle. That as we take steps of faith and as we follow through doing the things that we can do, God does the things that he does. This is the perfect picture of how God encourages and increases our faith. So many of us have prayed, I believe, would you help my unbelief? And Jesus is like, yes, here's the step. Will you take it? And will you take the next one? And will you follow me? Will you follow through? And here's why I put this up and why I went to this passage today is because I think for some of us, this doubt that we experience along the ways of, did that really happen? And does this really, is this really the thing for me? Or for Ananias, don't you think that between the step of faith going to the house and following through with putting his hand on, he didn't doubt God, but he doubted Saul? I don't know if this guy can be saved by Jesus. I think there was doubt right here in Ananias' heart where he was like, God, I know what you can do in my heart, but I don't know what you can do in this guy's heart. And yet he followed through. And the follow through led to even more trust, which led to another unexpected encounter, right? Did you guys see that? There's 3 of them. Immediately, he's healed. That's another encounter. He's baptized, which is like old school way of saying I belong to a new community. And then here's the third one. I actually didn't show it to you. It's the last verse. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. Saul experienced this unexpected encounter with Jesus by coming to his people. Don't underestimate the power of community in your life. The power of that third person who's entering into your doubts with you, who's entering into the movement of God with you. The Ananias is that God raises up to help encourage our faith, while God encourages their faith too. He spends days with the disciples. It shows me that the encounter that I have with Jesus is actually an encounter with his people. Here's what I want you to see. Is that Saul, when he was told, you're now brother Saul, was actually experiencing the acceptance and the welcome of the same people that he was there to persecute. That he experienced the forgiveness of Jesus by his, sure following the steps of faith that Jesus had laid out for him, but also by Ananias laying his hand on him saying, we accept you, Saul. Jesus loves you, Saul. We're not here for your harm, Saul, but we're here for your good. And as an act of good faith, we want you to receive the Spirit and be able to see again. God brings us into community that we might have a family and that we might be healed. And so here's our thing. Press in. Press in, take that step, follow through, watch God work. This whole entire cycle, it's the faith journey. It's faith full cycle is kind of how I said, a full circle. But the real world is just this, faithful. Just faithful. You and I at the bottom of all of our doubts is this one question: is God faithful? This is a word that we use to describe that time and time again, God has proven that he is good, that he does what he says, that he's there for me, that he promises a good result when I walk by faith, that God sees me and he loves me and that he knows me and he calls me by name and he calls me into more. The whole entire story of the Bible is a story of God's faithfulness proven time and time again, where he's run us all the way through this cycle, sometimes at the speed of light, and sometimes over decades, he runs us through this cycle. But here's what we've learned, is that when we doubt this: is God actually faithful? And here's why it's important for us to name our doubts. Like Ananias names the doubt about Saul. It's important for us to name our doubts and to bring our doubts to God. Because when we're honest with our doubts, Jesus makes space to show us that we can trust him. When we're honest with the thing that we don't think Jesus can do, it illuminates for us the way forward that he does the thing we didn't think he could do. And we're left singing that song, you're bigger, you're bigger. You're bigger than I thought you were. So I wonder what your step is this week. I don't know where you're at on this whole cycle, but I wonder what your next step is. For some of you, it's just simply praying, God, would you show me? I don't know if you have the faith enough to ask, God, would you blind me if that's what it takes, but would you show me that you're risen, that I can have faith in you? For some of us, you've had an encounter with Jesus, but you just said put off that step, whatever that step might be. For some of us, it might be, sending out a resume or an application or pulling out your phone and texting the person that you just feel compelled to reach out to and build a bridge of forgiveness back to. For others of us, it might be having a conversation with our spouse, just saying, here's what I think God is saying to me. And I've got a lot of doubts about this, but I feel like this is where we're going. And that's a risk for many of us, but I wonder, what's your step? And then if you would, as you name your doubts in that step, just take those steps, step after step after step. And what we'll find is that God leads us to an even greater faith than even you or I thought was possible. That Jesus leads us and invites us to come and see him. That when we come to him, he holds nothing back from us. That's actually what we're going to be talking about over the next sermon series here starting next Sunday. Pastor Brad is going to be here to kick it off. It's called All Access. It's the perfect series for you to invite one of your friends to come in and see how they could have an unexpected encounter with Jesus. And so I hope that you'd find someone who doubts Jesus and then tell them, hey, there's a church that really is a great place for you just to come with your questions and to come back and to experience more and more and more of him as we all find out that God is faithful. Heartland, we love you. We'll see you next week.